Welcome to Gerald Khalil's Conversation Piece. I share my thoughts on social content, sports, politics, and entertainment. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. So there's been talk about the declining television ratings regarding the NBA. Viewership for games on ESPN is down 28% so far for the 2024-25 season. And this comes off of a disappointing season in which its playoff viewership decreased by over 12%. And this is despite the league signing an 11-year deal for $76 billion with ESPN, ABC, NBC, and Amazon Prime Video. Now, what's interesting is that you have some high-profile NBA pundits who are concerned about the state of the NBA and why the ratings continue to go down. One of these pundits is FS1's Wright, who gave some insight into what he believes the problem is on a YouTube podcast called The House of Strauss. Let's listen to what he had to say, and I'll come back and give you my thoughts.
Now, It's interesting because they've signed this huge deal. They've gotten the bag. They've gotten the $76 billion, unless, I don't know, some regulatory agency says that they've got an issue with Warner Brothers. I don't think that will happen. So they have the money. Adam Silver has done what he should do. You're sounding the alarm, though, that this is a little tenuous. I think it's really interesting that you were sounding that alarm, Nick, because you're somebody who talks about sports and has finger on the pulse of what people are into. Are you detecting a bit of a slide of the NBA from the national conversation? Is that rooted a bit in what you're saying?
So a few things led to it. One of them was my own lack of excitement. I was like, oh, that's a problem. It's like NBA season was opening night. And I was like, like I cared, but I wasn't in the NBA. If for almost my whole life, the NBA was my clear number one. I think a lot of people, still associate me more with the NBA than the NFL because they got to know me because of my LeBron takes on Cowherd. And so that was a concern, but the other two things are just obvious to me. And it was so annoying because these self-important Celtic fans and media and bloggers are like, oh, the Celtics are so good. Nick Wright wants to change rules. Boston folks, I honest to God, do not give a shit about if you guys win the next 3 titles. I had a position years ago that the Celtics I thought were a bit of a, Danny Ainge was running a bit of a hope-based Ponzi scheme and was always, and so I made the point that they had not had the success that I thought people thought they would have, and they won the title. And so, years later, so bully for them. It's nothing to do with Boston. It's a very obvious point that I made sitting on stage at a Sloan Analytics conference to Daryl Morey 6 years ago, which was, I saw this train coming down the tracks. I was like, hey, obviously 3s are worth more than 2. And you are figuring out, and it's just going to snowball, that there's probably no upper bound to how many 3s you should shoot. That is the right way to win. Your job, the coach's job, is to win. However, the reason you want to be the coach or the GM is because those jobs pay millions of dollars. And those jobs pay millions of dollars while the coach and the GM of an ultimate Frisbee team pay nothing because the NBA is a good television product. And I'm here to tell you 100 threes a game is a bad television product. What do you do? And Daryl said, honestly, not my job to worry about that. My job's to win. It's the league's job. If they need to change the rules, change the rules. And I'm here to tell you, better fucking change the rules. because it is no different than if midway through last season, the Eagles, instead of going into a spiral, had got the tush push to where instead of it being an automatic 1.5 yards, it was an automatic 4 yards. And so they ran it every play of the game.
It's not football anymore.
It would be up to the league to snap change the rules. And if they didn't, it's like, well, whatever. And then at the beginning of this year, half the league's offense was the tush push. You got to snap change rules. And when you have incentivized an athlete as dynamic and explosive as Anthony Edwards, start shooting a dozen threes a game, you're going to turn off your audience, because at its core, what makes the NBA, every sport has its own thing that makes it special. And the NBA, the best athletes in the world. That's if the league has a tagline, best athletes in the world. And that means dunking on people. That means that a style, and where everyone doesn't play the exact same style. It's just bad for TV. And so that's one major concern that I said, if Adam Silver needs to be a wartime consigliere and take a page out of baseball's book. I don't care how intermittently unpopular this is. We are drastically changing the rules, because just like in baseball, the smart thing was the shift and this and that and all that. And he's like, well, okay, great. The fans don't like it. It's bad for the TV product. We are the entertainment industry, so we're going to change the rules. So that's what I think it's obvious.
So here's my thoughts. I agree with a lot of what he said. And not only that, if you listen to the podcast in its entirety, he mentions rule changes to the three-point line and rewarding more points for dunks. But perhaps his best idea was to cap the attempts of three-pointers to a certain amount. So say, for instance, you have two teams, and they are each allowed, say, 15 or 20 three-pointers each. So I thought that was a pretty innovative idea there. But in my opinion, there's other factors. Okay, so I'm going to go through what I feel are some other factors that the problem here. So one is how the league markets itself. So for so long, the league has marketed itself around star players, Magic, Bird, Jordan, you name them. And right now, you got LeBron, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, and you have a few others to a lesser extent. But what about marketing the teams, right? So you see, the NFL does a fantastic job doing this. It makes no difference who the player is. The NFL is going to put more value into the name on the front of the jersey as opposed to the name on the back. And going back to the NBA, why would someone who likes, say, the Oklahoma City Thunder tune into an NBA show on ESPN when the hosts are talking about the Lakers all day? And, they talk about the Lakers all day because it's a bigger market and because that star player, LeBron, plays for it. I mean, how would that individual feel? And especially when the Oklahoma City Thunder is a better team. You turn into this game and you expect, wow, our team is first in the Western Conference. We've won, 10 in a row. I know they're going to talk about us. And not a word. Talking about LeBron and the Lakers all day. So why should the fan care? And that's all part of why a person would want to tune in to an NBA game. Because if your team is getting talked about, if your team is getting the exposure of being on television, which is part of marketing the team, you're going to get, in my opinion, more viewers. That's just the way it works. But the NBA continues to go the path of marketing its star players. Number two, though it's not as prevalent as in years past, load management is another factor. Okay, so imagine going to a game, or imagine not only you going to a game, you're taking your family, you're taking your kids, and your kid, he loves Steph Curry, for example. All right, and you all get to this game and you find out that Steph isn't playing. And it's not because he's hurt. It's because, he's just not playing because he's resting. And what's the slap in the face is that, so we have a league that markets itself around the star players. But when I go to the game, the star player that I want to see that you're marketing to me isn't playing, not because he's hurt, but because he's resting. And that's got to be the most frustrating thing, right? Now, that practice of load management was actually started by Greg Popovich, the coach of the Spurs, where he would sit Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, and Tim Duncan. I'll never forget that. He would sit them games because he wanted them to get ready for the playoffs, and he didn't want to risk injury. And since then, and like I said, it's not as prevalent as it used to be because the NBA has put in some rules. But at one point, it just got ridiculous. Everyone was trying to do that, and people would go to the games, and the players that they wanted to see wasn't playing. And what happens is that it gives the perception that the players don't care. And when fans see that, they say, well, hey, they don't care. Why should I spend my money on games? So, therefore, I don't care. So that's another big issue. And the third thing I wanted to mention is the rule changes. So one of the rule changes, which is pretty obvious, is the 3-point line. All right. You want to maybe make it more of an arc where you are eliminating the corner three. And that's been talked about for quite a while, maybe doing that. That's the obvious change. But another thing I would like to see them do is to reintroduce hand checking. And hand checking was very prevalent in the 1990s. And it was the golden era of basketball, right? Now, you may ask, well, why did they get rid of hand checking? Well, it got to the point where fans thought that there was a little bit too much defense going on. We're seeing too many low scores. You had some scores in the 70s, right? And the NBA thought that wasn't a good thing for its product. And at that time, maybe it wasn't. So therefore, you got the change, and now you got what you got now. But I look at it like this, right? If you want to make a kind of comparison, in the 2000s, you had a certain style that you wore of clothing. And once the 2010s came about, those styles of clothing weren't no longer in style. They were out of fashion. You had manufacturers started making new types of clothes for people to wear. And then the 2020s came, And what was fashionable in the 2010s were no longer fashionable. What was fashionable, or what is now going on, is that, hey, they found that they say, hey, what was back in the 2000s, that's in fashion again. It's in style. Let's bring that back. And in the 2020s, you brought back in style what was in style back in the 2000s. So here we go with the NBA. Same thing. 1990s. What was working then didn't work in the 2000s. Well, maybe it's time to bring it back. Maybe it will be in style in the 2020s to bring back hand checking. And if after a few years, if the fans don't like what they're seeing, you make the change to something that's where you got more scoring. And that's where the NFL is so great, because the NFL will make rule changes at a drop of a dime. And if it doesn't work, they just get rid of it for the next season. They're not adverse to change at all. So those are my thoughts. Please leave yours in the comment section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you in the next one.